In movies, a woman's water breaks in a dramatic gush, she screams in a taxi, and 20 minutes later, she's holding a baby. Real labor? My first labor was 18 hours. And for the first 12 hours, I was at home watching Netflix because the contractions weren't even that bad yet. Today, I'm breaking down what actually happens during labor, stage by stage, hour by hour. Not the Hollywood version, the real version. Because knowing what to expect can make all the difference between feeling terrified and feeling prepared. Hey everyone, I'm Diana and welcome back to Sweet Pregnant. I'm a doctor specializing in women's health and I'm also a mom of 3, so I've been through labor from both sides of the hospital bed. And here's what I've learned. Labor is nothing like what you see in movies. It's longer, it's slower, and honestly, for a lot of it, it's kind of boring. I know that sounds strange, but the truth is, early labor can feel like very mild period cramps while you're just waiting around for things to progress. The intense, dramatic part? That comes later, and it doesn't last as long as you think. So today, I'm walking you through the entire process, what early labor feels like, when to go to the hospital, what active labor is really like, and what happens in those final moments when you're actually pushing. Let's start from the beginning. Before we even get to labor, let's talk about the signs that labor is approaching. These are called prodromal signs, and they can start days or even weeks before actual labor begins. Lightening. This is when the baby drops lower into your pelvis. You might notice that you can breathe easier because there's less pressure on your lungs, but now there's more pressure on your bladder, so you're peeing every 20 minutes. For first-time moms, this usually happens 2 to 4 weeks before labor. For moms who've had babies before, it might not happen until labor actually starts. The mucus plug. Your cervix is sealed with a thick plug of mucus during pregnancy. As your cervix starts to soften and dilate in preparation for labor, this plug can come out. It looks like thick, jelly-like discharge, sometimes with streaks of blood. People call it bloody show. Losing your mucus plug can happen weeks before labor, or it can happen the day labor starts. It's a sign that things are progressing, but it doesn't mean labor is imminent. With my first baby, I lost my mucus plug 2 weeks before I went into labor. With my second, it happened the morning labor started. Every pregnancy is different. Nesting instinct. This is a sudden burst of energy where you feel an overwhelming urge to clean, organize, and prepare everything. I reorganized my entire kitchen at 2 a.m. 3 days before my first baby was born. I couldn't stop. I had to clean out every cabinet. Not everyone experiences this, but it's common enough that it's worth mentioning. Braxton Hicks contractions. These are practice contractions that can start in the 2nd or 3rd trimester. They feel like your belly tightening and then releasing. The key difference between Braxton Hicks and real labor contractions? Braxton Hicks are irregular and usually go away if you change positions or drink water. Real labor contractions get stronger, longer, and closer together over time. Now let's talk about early labor, which is officially the first stage of labor. This is when your cervix starts dilating from 0 to about 3 or 4 centimeters. And this stage can take hours or even a full day, especially for first-time moms. What does it feel like? Honestly, for most women, early labor feels like mild menstrual cramps. Some lower back pain, some pelvic pressure, but it's usually manageable. The contractions during early labor are irregular at first. You might have one, then nothing for 15 minutes, then another one, then 20 minutes go by. As early labor progresses, the contractions become more regular. They start following a pattern. Maybe every 10 minutes, then every 7 minutes, then every 5 minutes. When I was in early labor with my first baby, I woke up around 3 a.m. with what felt like period cramps. I timed a few contractions, but they were all over the place. 10 minutes apart, then 15, then 8. So I went back to sleep. When I woke up in the morning, the contractions were still there, but they still weren't regular or intense. I made breakfast. I took a shower. I walked around the house. By noon, the contractions were coming every 7 to 8 minutes and lasting about 30 to 40 seconds each. They were uncomfortable, but I could talk through them. I called my doctor, and she told me to stay home and rest. She said to come to the hospital when contractions were 5 minutes apart, lasting 1 minute each for at least 1 hour. That's called the 5-1-1 rule, 5 minutes apart, 1 minute long, for 1 hour. Here's what you should do during early labor. Rest. Seriously, sleep if you can. You're going to need your energy later. Eat light meals. Once you get to the hospital, they might not let you eat, so have some easy-to-digest food now. I had toast and scrambled eggs. Stay hydrated. Drink water consistently. Take a warm shower or bath. It can help with the discomfort and help you relax. Time your contractions, but don't obsess over it. Check in every hour or so to see if there's a pattern developing. Do not rush to the hospital during early labor unless your water breaks, you're bleeding heavily, or you have other concerning symptoms. If you go too early, they'll likely send you home, which is frustrating and exhausting. With my first baby, I stayed home for about 12 hours during early labor. It felt long at the time, but I'm glad I stayed home where I was comfortable. Let's talk about your water breaking, because this is another thing movies get completely wrong. In movies, water breaking is always the first sign of labor. A huge dramatic gush, and then boom, instant intense contractions. In reality, only about 10 to 15% of women have their water break before labor starts. For most women, the water breaks during active labor, or the doctor breaks it for you at the hospital. What does it actually feel like? For some women, it is a big gush. You feel a pop or a release, and then fluid comes out. But for many women, it's more like a slow leak. You feel wetness, and you're not sure if it's amniotic fluid, pee, or discharge. Here's how to tell. Amniotic fluid is clear or slightly pink, it doesn't smell like urine, and it keeps leaking. If you empty your bladder and the wetness continues, it's probably your water. If your water breaks, call your doctor right away, even if you're not having contractions. Once your water breaks, there's a risk of infection, so your doctor will want to monitor you and might want you to come to the hospital. Labor usually starts within 24 hours of your water breaking. If it doesn't start on its own, your doctor might induce labor to reduce infection risk. With my second baby, my water broke at home while I was folding laundry. It was a small gush, not a flood. I wasn't having contractions yet, but I called my doctor and went to the hospital. They confirmed my water had broken, admitted me, and contractions started about 2 hours later. So if your water breaks, stay calm, put on a pad, call your doctor, and head to the hospital. But don't panic, you're not going to have the baby in the car. Now we're getting to active labor, which is when things get real. Active labor is when your cervix dilates from about 4 centimeters to 7 centimeters. This stage is shorter than early labor, but more intense. Contractions during active labor are stronger, longer, and closer together. They're coming every 3 to 5 minutes, lasting 60 to 90 seconds, and they're painful. During a contraction, you can't talk, you can't walk. You have to stop whatever you're doing and breathe through it. What does active labor feel like? Imagine the worst period cramp you've ever had, multiply it by 10, and add intense pressure in your lower back and pelvis. The pain comes in waves. It builds, peaks, and then subsides, and then you get a break before the next one. That break between contractions is important. It's your body's way of giving you a rest. Use it. Breathe. Drink water. Change positions. This is usually when you go to the hospital, if you're not there already. When I hit active labor with my first baby, I knew immediately. The contractions went from uncomfortable but manageable to I need to focus and breathe through this in the span of about an hour. I couldn't talk during contractions anymore. I had to lean on my husband and breathe slowly. That's when we went to the hospital. When we got there, they checked my cervix and I was 5 centimeters dilated. Active labor. What happens at the hospital during active labor? They'll monitor your contractions and the baby's heart rate. They'll check your cervix periodically to see how much you're dilating. This is when you can get pain relief if you want it. An epidural, which numbs you from the waist down, is the most common option. You can also get IV pain medication, though it's not as effective as an epidural. I got an epidural with my first baby at about 6 centimeters. It took about 20 minutes to place it and another 20 minutes to fully kick in. Once it did, the relief was incredible. With my second and third babies, I also got epidurals. Some women choose to go without pain medication, and that's completely valid. But for me, the epidural allowed me to rest and conserve energy for pushing. During active labor, you might also experience back pain, especially if the baby is facing your back instead of your spine. This is called back labor, and it's brutal. Counter pressure on your lower back can help, nausea or vomiting. Labor hormones can make you feel sick. It's unpleasant but normal, shaking or trembling. Your body is working incredibly hard, and shaking is a common response. Emotional intensity. You might feel scared, overwhelmed, or emotional. That's completely normal. Labor is intense physically and emotionally. How long does active labor last? For first-time moms, active labor typically lasts 4 to 8 hours. For women who've had babies before, it's usually shorter, maybe 3 to 5 hours. But every labor is different. Some are faster, some are slower. There's no way to predict exactly how long yours will be. Now let's talk about the hardest part of labor, transition. Transition is the end of active labor, when your cervix dilates from 7 centimeters to 10 centimeters, which is fully dilated. This is the most intense phase of labor, but it's also the shortest, usually lasting 30 minutes to 2 hours. What does transition feel like? Contractions are coming one on top of another. You might only get 30 to 60 seconds between contractions, which is barely enough time to catch your breath. The contractions are long and powerful. They can last 90 seconds or more. You might feel intense pressure in your pelvis and rectum, like you need to have a bowel movement. This is actually the baby moving down into the birth canal. Emotionally, transition is when many women feel like they can't do it anymore. I remember hitting transition with my first baby and thinking, I can't do this. I want to go home. I changed my mind. That's a classic sign of transition. If a laboring woman says, I can't do this anymore, she's probably in transition, which means she's almost done. Your partner or support person should reassure you that you're doing great and that you're almost there. Because you are. Once you're fully dilated, it's time to push. If you have an epidural, transition is much more manageable. I barely felt the contractions during transition with my second and third babies because the epidural was working well. I could see them on the monitor, but I didn't feel the pain. If you're going without pain medication, transition is going to be the toughest part. Focus on breathing. Change positions if you can. Remember that this phase doesn't last long. Once you're fully dilated at 10 centimeters, it's time to push. This is the second stage of labor, and it's when you actively work to move the baby down the birth canal and out into the world. How long does pushing take? For first-time moms, pushing usually takes 1 to 3 hours. For women who've had babies before, it's often shorter, sometimes just a few minutes to an hour. But again, every labor is different. Some women push for 20 minutes, some push for 4 hours. Both are normal. What does pushing feel like? If you have an epidural, you'll feel pressure but not pain. You'll feel the urge to push, like you need to have a bowel movement, and you'll push with each contraction. If you don't have an epidural, pushing can actually feel better than the contractions because you're actively doing something. You have some control, and the act of pushing can be a relief. How do you push? Your doctor or nurse will guide you. Usually you take a deep breath, hold it, and push down into your pelvis like you're having a bowel movement. You push for about 10 seconds, take a breath, and push again. You do this 2 to 3 times per contraction. Between contractions, you rest and breathe. What's happening during this stage? The baby is moving down the birth canal. With each push, the baby moves a little lower. Eventually, the baby's head starts to crown, which means it's visible at the vaginal opening. This is called the ring of fire because of the intense stretching sensation. Your doctor might ask you to stop pushing at this point and just breathe while the baby's head emerges slowly. This helps prevent tearing. Once the head is out, the doctor will check if the umbilical cord is around the baby's neck, which is common and usually not a problem. They'll gently slip it over the baby's head. Then, with the next contraction, you push out the shoulders and the rest of the baby's body, which is much easier than the head. And then, suddenly, your baby is here. They'll place the baby on your chest and you'll hear that first cry. It's the most surreal, overwhelming, beautiful moment. With my first baby, when they put her on my chest, I couldn't believe it was over. I couldn't believe she was real. I just stared at her in shock and awe. What happens next? The baby's umbilical cord will be clamped and cut, either by your doctor or your partner if they want to. The baby will be dried off, their nose and mouth will be suctioned if needed, and they'll be assessed quickly to make sure they're healthy. If everything looks good, the baby stays on your chest for skin-to-skin contact, which helps regulate their temperature and heart rate and promotes bonding. There's actually a third stage of labor that nobody talks about: delivering the placenta. After the baby is born, you'll continue to have mild contractions. These help the placenta separate from the uterine wall. Your doctor might ask you to give a small push, and the placenta will slide out. It doesn't hurt. After everything you just went through, delivering the placenta is nothing. The doctor will examine the placenta to make sure it's intact. If any pieces are left inside, they need to be removed to prevent infection. Then they'll massage your uterus to help it contract and slow the bleeding. This is uncomfortable but necessary. If you tore or had an episiotomy, the doctor will stitch you up at this point. If you have an epidural, you won't feel it. If you don't, they'll numb the area first. And then you're done. You did it! You're a mom! So that's what labor actually looks like. It's not a 20-minute sprint like in the movies. It's a marathon. It's long, it's intense, and yes, it's painful. But your body is designed for this. Women have been doing this since the beginning of humanity. And now you know what to expect. You know that early labor can take all day. You know that active labor is when things get serious. You know that transition is the hardest but shortest part, and you know what pushing and delivery actually feel like. Knowledge is power. When you understand what's happening in your body, labor feels less scary and more manageable. If this video helped you feel more prepared, hit that subscribe button. And drop a comment. What's your biggest fear about labor? Let's talk about it. You've got this. I believe in you. I'll see you in the next one.